Hey, welcome to Riverside. My question to you today is, what is the purpose of mankind? What is the purpose of mankind? I asked my students this, and I got all kinds of different answers. Some of them were really good answers. Some of them were, you really got them thinking. But like one of the answers was to spread the gospel. Another answer that I got is to make disciples. Another answer that I got was to follow Jesus. And those are all great answers. But I'm really going to push you, just like my students, to really think deeply about this issue. To understand what the purpose of mankind is, that purpose has to be true for all humans throughout all history and throughout all the future, through all space and in all situations. In other words, the purpose of mankind, in order for it to be the purpose of mankind, has to be universally true for every single human on the face of the earth at all times. And so making disciples, therefore, can't be the purpose of mankind. Why? Because there was a point when disciples weren't needed. There was a point when disciples weren't a thing. Look at the Old Testament. Look at the pre-fall, right? Before sin entered into the world, there was a point where disciples weren't really needed. So is this making disciples the purpose of mankind? The other, another answer is spreading the gospel. You would think spreading the gospel surely is our purpose. But spreading the gospel can't be the purpose of all mankind, because there was a point when the gospel didn't exist yet. How can I spread the gospel without knowledge of what it is? Don't get me wrong, making disciples, what else was it? Spreading the gospel. Very important things. Those are our mission, and we'll get there next week. But is that the purpose of mankind? You get to following Jesus. This is getting close. But again, is that the purpose of mankind? The purpose of mankind is deeper than all of those things. It forces us to look inward. What if I told you that the purpose of mankind can be found in Genesis? I love Genesis. The book of Genesis is one of my favorite books in the entire Bible. The reason I love Genesis is because we get this beautiful picture of what the world is supposed to be like before sin entered into the world. It's this beautiful picture. So if you're out there and you're like, well, I wonder what the world is supposed to be like, look no further than Genesis 1, 2, and 3. That's the perfect picture of what the world was designed to be like. Genesis 1, 2, and 3 describes very briefly the world when it was the way that God intended it to be. No sin, no hatred, no idolatry. It was perfect. And when we look to Genesis, we see the most pure form of the relationship between God and man before it was defiled. So it makes sense to look there to find the purpose of mankind. What do we know about Genesis 1 and 2? Well, we know that God made creation in 6 days. On the seventh day, he rested. We know that God makes man in his own image. We know that God places man in the Garden of Eden. And man, Adam is supposed to tend to the garden and, name all the animals. And it's like, maybe that's our purpose. But again, in order for it to be our purpose, it has to be true for all man throughout all time and place. And in all situations, the garden, we can't tend to the garden. The animals are already named. So that can't be our purpose. Tending to creation isn't our purpose. It's a good thing, but it's not our purpose. And before sin entered the world, in Genesis 1 and 2, we see man who doesn't have stress, who's not striving to succeed in some way, who's not even searching for purpose. Why? Because Adam already had his purpose. He was already walking and living in his purpose. He already figured that out. It was like innate. It was like he didn't need to wonder what his purpose is. He was living in it already. So what was the purpose that Adam was living in? Well, what did Adam do aside from tend to the garden and name all the animals? Like what did he do? Well, he walked with God. He talked with God. He was with God. He was known by God. He was knowing God. And within that thing, right, like within that idea right there, we find our purpose. You have to realize the purpose of man isn't something you achieve. It's someone that you know. Because before there was a mission to accomplish, there was a God to walk with. The purpose of man is simply to know God and to be known by Him. And I know what you're saying. Like, what about making disciples? Aren't we supposed to make disciples? Yes, we are supposed to make disciples. What about helping the poor? What about feeding the hungry? What about clothing the naked? All of these things are great. We're supposed to do them. We're called to do them by God, but all of those things are a byproduct of knowing God. Sit on that for a second. All of those things that I just mentioned, helping the poor, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, making disciples, all of those are a byproduct of knowing God. The question is why? Think about who God is. God has revealed Himself to us through His Son, Jesus. So the question then is, who is Jesus? Well, Jesus is the man who is God, who came down to earth in the form of a baby, who gave His entire life to making disciples, helping the poor, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, sacrificing His very life, being killed in the most gruesome way so that we can be one with Him again. That's who Jesus is. Jesus is love, not just emotional love, not infatuation, but sacrificial, truth-filled, holy love. That's who Jesus is. So when we know God, not just know about Him, but truly know Him, when we have a deep, close, personal relationship with God like Adam did in the garden, we won't be able to help but to make disciples, help the poor, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. But none of those things can be done the way God intends without first knowing Him. It's not possible. It's like you can do a lot of good things without knowing God, but you can't reflect God without knowing God. It's not possible. So I want you to sit with this idea. Before we get to serving, before we get to doing, before we get to all these different things, I want you to sit with the idea that the purpose of man is to simply know Jesus. To know Him so deeply that our life starts to look like His. So if our purpose is to know God, then the question becomes, what does that actually look like? Like what does it look like to actually know God? Because it's easy to say, know God, but what does that look like in real life? What does that look like on Tuesday afternoon at school, at home, in the middle of a busy life? What's cool is that Jesus actually gives us a perfect picture of this. And it can be found in Luke chapter 10. It says, Luke chapter 10, verse 38, it says, while they were traveling, He entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed Him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who also sat at the Lord's feet and was listening to what He said, but Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came up and asked Jesus, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? So tell her to give me a hand. The Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you're worried and upset about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary's made the right choice, and it will not be taken from her. I love this passage. It's such a beautiful story, but imagine Jesus is coming to town. Imagine He was coming to your house. Would you clean up? Would you dust the cobwebs in the floorboards? Would you dust off the fans? Would you, clean off the mirror? Would you clean the bathroom? Would you clean the kitchen? Would you cook a good meal? Would you light a candle, a nice cozy candle? Would you fluff the pillows? Like, what would you do if Jesus came to your actual house? I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, we'd have company over. My mom's like, we had to clean everything. And I mean, deep clean the entire house. We have to pretend like we don't live here. Because if people find out that we live here, then they'll know we live here and we can't have that. And so she would clean everything, and she'd have us help her clean everything. And I'm like, some of this stuff is pointless. Like, they're not going to look here. They're not going to look in the medicine cabinet. What are we doing? But it's like if Jesus was coming to your house, of course you would want to put your best foot forward. Of course you would want to make it as cozy and as nice and as wonderful of an experience as you possibly could. And so Jesus comes to town. And Martha welcomes him into her home. So Jesus comes into her home. She has this sister Mary. And while Martha is doing all the stuff, she's cleaning the house, she's cooking a meal, she's getting everything together, she's setting the table. I don't know what all she's actually doing, but I'm kind of just giving you some ideas. She's doing all the things. She's making sure it's as wonderful of an experience as possible. She's trying to be as hospitable as possible. And while she's doing all this, what is Mary doing? Well, Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus and just listening and just being with Jesus. That's all she's doing. And of course, I mean, if I was in Martha's shoes, her reaction's pretty rational. So Martha sees this and she kind of gets frustrated. She's like Jesus, like, Lord, I've been doing all these different things. I've been slaving away, trying to make this as wonderful of an experience as possible for you. And Mary, look, she's just sitting at your feet. Can you please tell her to get up and help me? I've got a lot on my plate. I'm overloaded. Please have her help me. Jesus answered her, Martha, Martha, you're worried and upset about many things, but I love this. But one thing is necessary. I love that. You're worried and upset about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. And then he goes on to say, Mary's made the right choice, and it won't be taken from her. Guys, I want to stress to you this idea, this point that just knowing God, just being with God is your purpose. Jesus didn't die Jesus didn't die for you to make disciples. Jesus didn't die for you to help the poor. Like he died to know you. He died to be with you. He died to be in your presence. He died so we could be with God. It's that simple. Helping the poor, doing all the good things, serving people, being in the hands and feet of Jesus, spreading the gospel. Those are all good things. We should be doing those. I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things. But knowing Jesus comes first. You can't do any of those things if you don't know Jesus first. Your purpose is to simply know Jesus. And it's like if you think about how our modern world views purpose, it's always, you have to be doing something. You have to be productive. You have to produce something. You have to create something. You have to fix something. Something has to be done. But it's before any of that happens, before any kingdom work happens, just work on knowing God. Just start there. The rest will worry. It'll figure itself out. When you're in God's presence, the way I'm talking about, you will naturally serve the poor. You'll naturally make disciples. But it starts with knowing Him. The point I'm making, you can be busy for God while still not being with God. Does that make sense? You can be busy, and this is so true for ministry. Those of you out there who might be in ministry, like, or like maybe like not even like as a profession, but like you're doing the work of ministry, children's ministry, youth ministry, like whatever it might be, you know this. It can be so easy to get wrapped up. Well, I got a lesson to write, and I got a senior high retreat to plan for, and I got all these things that I got to get done, and I got to get done. But you can do all those things without actually knowing Jesus. And that's what happens to so many people. We get so wrapped up in doing things for Jesus that we forget to just sit at his feet. We turn into Martha. Everything has to be done. Just sit at his feet. You can be doing things for Jesus while still not knowing Jesus. Martha was serving Jesus while Mary was knowing Jesus. And Jesus said that Mary chose better. The purpose of your life is not to do things for God. It's simply to know God, because when you truly know God, everything else will follow. So let me ask you, are you more like Mary or are you more like Martha? Are you more like Mary or are you more like Martha? Does your faith look like sitting at your feet? Does your faith look like sitting at Jesus' feet, soaking yourself in his word, and desperately trying to know him better? Or does it look like trying not to sin more, trying to do the right things, checking the right boxes, going through the motions, trying to get to heaven? Because it's very possible to live your life like Martha did, running around, doing stuff for Jesus while never actually getting around to just sitting at his feet. And if that's you, you're wasting your time. Only one thing is necessary. And maybe this resonates with fishermen. Like, obviously, Jesus is at the throne of God, the right hand of God. So I can't literally sit at his feet. But this is why I go fishing. This is why many of you go fishing. Because fishing has less to do with fish. It has everything to do for me with just being with God again. I find myself anxious and tired and burnt out if I don't go fishing. It sounds weird, sounds counterproductive in our modern world, but I have to sit at his feet. I have to be with him. If I'm not with him, my ministry fails. And it's visible. It's noticeable. If I'm not spending time with Jesus, you can tell. And so, if you're out there and you're a fisherman, maybe use that time, if you haven't already, to connect with God again. This is why Riverside was started. Use that time to connect with God again. But only one thing is necessary, and that's knowing Jesus. Now, next week, I'm going to continue this series. This is a series, by the way, that I did for my students. It's called On Purpose. And for the first lesson, we talked about our purpose as mankind. And it's an uncomfortable lesson because it's like so often when we talk about purpose, we talk about, well, what am I going to do? But it's more about who do you know? Do you really know Jesus? And so this one's kind of an uncomfortable lesson. It's something that we're not used to hearing. But your purpose is to know God. Next week, we're going to talk about our mission. Our mission. What is our mission? It comes from the Great Commission. We're going to go through the Great Commission. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Acts chapter 2 and see how the Great Commission was first fulfilled at Acts chapter 2 and how it's still our calling today, our mission today. The third lesson, the third series or installment of the video series, whatever you want to call it, will be about our calling. In other words, how does God call you to fulfill your mission? It's like our calling flows from our mission. Our mission flows from our purpose. And so it all goes together. So if this was an uncomfortable lesson, if you're sitting here going, wait a second, we're supposed to be doing things too. You can't say we shouldn't do things. Wait, there's another lesson to come. Wait till the entire series is done. And then we'll move on from there. Tight lines. By the way, I've got to meet a lot of you lately. And that's kind of the coolest thing that Riverside has produced or done for me, is to simply know you guys. Instagram's not good for community, I've learned over the years. It's really good for getting people, it's good for getting eyes on your ministry, whatever you're doing. But when it comes to actually creating like a community, it's not effective. It only pushes your content out to a small portion of your followers. There's no real way to connect with many people or a large group of people. And so what I'm planning on doing is trying to find a way where we as Riverside, can connect. Whether it's live streaming, whether it's moving it to like a locals channel where we do Bible studies and that kind of stuff. I don't know what it's going to look like. But pray for it, because I don't want this to just be some content factory. I don't want Riverside to be something that you just scroll through and like and then move on. I want it to be something that impacts your life on a deep and personal level. So pray for us as we move forward. Another thing I've been working on, and this is kind of separate, it's kind of a brand new idea I had. I've preached many times that it's the parents' job to discipline their students. It's the parents' job to discipline their child. I've even spoken from the pulpit. Do not bring me your child and ask me to make a Christian out of them, because that is your job as parents. I've preached that many times, and I still believe it. I still stand by that. But I think the issue might be a lot of parents don't know how to effectively disciple their kids. They don't know where to start. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to do it without making it awkward, and I get it. And so I'm working on a project where I disciple parents as they disciple their kids. I've got 10 years in youth ministry. I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers, but I do have experience. I do have experience writing lessons and writing devotionals and curriculum. I do have experience working with teenagers and teaching them and discipling them. So why not share that experience that I have with parents who probably want to disciple their kids but don't necessarily know how? So stay tuned on that. Pray for it. And yeah, know God, people. Know God. That's your purpose. Don't get wrapped up into working on things yet. Don't get wrapped up on doing things yet. Just work on knowing God today. Tight lines. I'll see you next time.